Hey, I'm Libby Shaw and welcome to episode 3 of the Libby Shaw Show. Thank you for tuning in. So today there's a few different things that I want to talk about. I'd like to talk firstly about whether or not you should go to a concert of an artist if you're not a huge fan. Then I'd also like to talk about whether or not Taylor Swift should be releasing a new album, The Tortured Poets Department, on April 19th. Next month, which is a date that falls in the middle of her highest grossing tour ever. Not just her highest grossing tour ever, but the highest grossing tour ever, like the biggest ever tour in the world. But let's get into that first topic, shall we? So, should people go to a concert of an artist if they're not a huge fan? Yes and no. Like, don't get me wrong, okay? Like, I completely understand people's frustration if they were a huge Taylor Swift fan and missed out on getting Eras tour tickets. Like, if that had been me in that position, I would have been fuming. I would have been so ropeable. So I definitely do understand people's frustration. And when I was at the Eras tour, so in Melbourne night 3, that was the night I was front row, which is so amazing. I still can't believe it. And I was next to somebody who had managed to get their ticket, I think either that day or the day before, because one of their friends couldn't justify spending that amount of money. She didn't know all the lyrics. Her daughter was a huge fan, so she'd obviously been exposed to Taylor Swift's music, but she wasn't a huge fan. And then the last night in Sydney night 4, I was next to people who were sitting down pretty much half the concert, especially during Folklore and Evermore. And I was next to people who were going to the bathroom during All Too Well 10-minute version, which anybody who knows me in real life knows that is my absolute all-time favorite Taylor Swift song, and that you do not leave during that song at all. That is a masterpiece. It is an absolute masterpiece. Some, of course, would say Tolerate It from the Evermore set is a masterpiece, and in some ways I definitely agree. In terms of the staging, the acting, the performing, it truly is a masterpiece. Like, when I saw it in the cinema for the first time last October, I was shocked. Like, I'm not just talking the singing, I'm talking the staging, the introduction to the song, I'm talking the performance. It was incredible. It was definitely one of the standout moments of the show and remains to this day one of the standout performances just because of the pure commitment to that piece of work. Like, there was pure commitment from Taylor and the other performer that she was working with on the stage during Tolerate It. It was incredible. So getting back to the question of should casual fans be able to go to concerts if that's all they are? So as I mentioned in my first video, I was a casual fan during the Red tour, and I had bought a ticket to see the Red tour, which I stupidly sold. But then I think because I was a new fan, so this is the original Red era in 2012, 2013. So then I think, well, would I really have enjoyed that show knowing that I was a new fan and only knew 2 or 3 of the songs? And I'm not entirely sure that I would have. I don't know that I would have. But then I did go to the 1989 World Tour. I knew a few more of her songs, but I wasn't a huge fan, not like I am now. But that's what actually is how I became a huge fan. I became a huge fan during the 1989 World Tour. So on that basis, I would have to argue that yes, people who are just casual fans should be able to go to concerts. Like, a fan is still a fan. And, you know, if we think back to how artists get discovered in the first place, most artists do get discovered by, you know, live gigs, playing gigs at their local bar, playing gigs at their local school, their local church, their local mall, their local whatever. The point is, live music is pretty much how most artists do get discovered. And the simple reality is that some people are going to miss out on concerts. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's because a casual fan bought a ticket that you missed out. Like, people could miss out because of other factors. They could miss out because they wanted 5 tickets all seated together, but there were only 5 tickets seated in different parts of the stadium, and they weren't willing to sit apart from their friends or family members who they wanted to go with. Then there's also the fact that people have different budgets. The tickets available might be, for argument's sake, $380 per ticket, but your budget is, say, only $160. That, you know, there's still going to be a disconnect. And as long as somebody's paying for a seat, or in Europe's case, general admission, does it really matter if they're not a huge fan? I mean, a fan is a fan, right? And some concerts are just going to have a higher demand than others. That's just my cat in the background. She also wants to be on camera. She's obviously gate crashed. So yes, just like Taylor Swift, I have a cat. I have a ginger cat. Her name is Squeaks. She's 4 years old. I got her about a month before the pandemic. Anyway, getting back to what I was talking about casual fans going to concerts. Yes, I definitely understand people's annoyance at, you know, missing out on seeing their favorite artist because of a casual fan. But at the same time, a casual fan could become a major fan, as I did after the 1989 World Tour. And people can still enjoy live music even if they don't know the band. Like, there have been several times when I've seen bands when I haven't either, you know, known all their music, known their old music, or known half of their discography. Like, recently I saw The National. I pretty much didn't know any of their music. I went to see them because I wanted to see what all the fuss was. I mean, they were good live. I didn't like that one of the singers was drunk pretty much the entire show. That would be my only criticism. Then I also saw Elton John a couple of years ago, and I pretty much only knew Can You Feel the Love Tonight, Candle in the Wind, and a couple of his other songs, but I still had a great time. Same with Evanescence, same with The Cause. Like, you don't need to know an artist's entire discography to have a good time. But then there's been other artists where I do know their entire discography, you know, like Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, Delta Goodrem, and countless others, which would be too long to even talk about in this video. Like, we'd be here all night. And I'm pretty sure you don't want to be listening to me talk about all the concerts I've been to all night. But I have been to Delta Goodrem a few times, Lord once, Nickelback twice because I saw them with the Rolling Stones, Kylie Minogue, Shania Twain twice. I went to Shania Twain twice. Actually, on that point, some people have also been getting a little bit salty recently about people going to the Taylor Swift concerts more than once. You know, some being like, oh, that's unfair. You shouldn't be going to the concert when I couldn't get a ticket. Again, I have to come back to my earlier point. Like, just because someone bought a ticket to multiple shows, they're not the reason you missed out. Like, there's so many different factors. You know, maybe you could only go a particular night. Maybe they were available every night. Maybe you had different requirements, different budget requirements, etc., etc. The list goes on. And who is it? I've used this analogy in the past, but it's really no different, right, to somebody owning, say, 10 houses and another person renting and owning 0 houses. It's a similar concept. So yes, I do think it's disappointing that some people miss out on concerts. It's inevitable, and the only way to, it can't ever be prevented. Like, even if people only went to see an artist once, there would still be people who would miss out just because there is supply and demand, and just because there aren't enough tickets to go around. Like, even if Taylor Swift had done 15 shows in Australia, demand still would have outstripped supply. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. And so that kind of, while we are talking about Taylor Swift, that sort of brings me to the next thing that I want to talk about, which is, obviously, at the Grammys this year, she announced that she was going to be releasing a new album called The Tortured Poets Department on the 19th of April. It's her 11th studio album. The Eras Tour, of course, covers 10 albums. It covers her self-titled debut Taylor Swift album, Fearless, Speak Now, Red, 1989, Reputation, Lover, Folklore, Evermore, and then, of course, most recently released in 2021, Midnights. And for those of you who know the set list inside out, you know that the debut album doesn't have a permanent spot, which is hugely disappointing. It means that the only way we're actually going to hear any of the debut songs, and yes, thankfully, I was lucky enough to hear a debut song, Teardrops on My Guitar, on the piano on Melbourne, night 3, and then Sydney, night 1, I heard a mashup of You're Not Sorry with Should Have Said No. I believe that's what it was. I'd need to check. When I post this, I'll post it in the comments so you can see exactly which night it was. So that was pretty cool. But the debut album definitely should have had a permanent song. Like, if I'm being completely honest, I probably would have dropped 'Tis the Damn Season from the Evermore set list. I think I also would have left, out of the Lover set list, I would have left The Man off. And then from the Midnights set, I could have lived without Lavender Haze or without Vigilante Shit. So that would have left 4 spaces for the debut album. And the songs I would have chosen would have been Tim McGraw. You can't not have Tim McGraw. I mean, that's the song that got it all started for her. Her first ever single. I would have had Picture to Burn. I would have had Teardrops on My Guitar. I mean, that was amazing live. Like, I mean, I screamed when I realized it was Teardrops on My Guitar, because I'd been hoping the whole time that I would get a debut song, and I did. And I also would have had, either Stay Beautiful or Mary's Song as the 4th song. Like, I do understand Taylor leaving the debut song off the permanent set list, because, you know, she became a big artist really during the Fearless era, but it still would have been cool to have at least 1 or 2 songs. Like, if I could only have 2 songs, it would definitely be Tim McGraw and Picture to Burn. Or I'd go Tim McGraw and a mashup of Picture to Burn with Teardrops on My Guitar. Well, that could actually be really interesting, because they're total opposites. That could be really interesting to see if that would work. Yeah, that would be really interesting. But sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. So anyway, should Taylor Swift be releasing her new album during the middle of her tour? Like, She definitely, like, as she has said multiple times now on tour, she needed to make the album. Like, I fully understand that, and I definitely agree. Like, if you need to make an album, make the album, release the album, do what you need to do. Like, that's what art is about. And that's why we have art. We have art so we can express ourselves. But I am hoping that the Tortured Poets department, because it sounds like an absolutely epic album. I mean, we'll find out next month. But I really want Tortured Poets department to have its own tour. Like, because, I mean, it is a little bit self-interested, of course. Like, I've had my tour dates. I've had my Australian tour dates. So there's only, you know, the European and the second US leg of the tour left. And so I wouldn't want the set list to be changed now, but at the same time, I don't want the Tortured Poets department to be denied a tour. You know, I would love to hear those songs live. I also would have loved to have been to Loverfest, which of course sadly was cancelled because of the pandemic. And I would have loved if Midnight's had had its own album. Like, there are definitely songs from that album I would have loved to have heard live. Like, I would have loved to have heard Paris, Hits Different, and a couple of others. I was lucky enough to get Would've, Could've, Should've in Sydney, which was very cool. So if the other option before I wrap this up is, if she does decide to change the set list up, maybe she could do another Oz leg. I mean, that's not entirely out of the question, is it? I mean, it would have to be next year, but then I think, like, she's been doing this tour for the last couple of years. You know, she needs a break. Like, you can't tour endlessly. But then a couple of weeks ago, I was having a look online, and Elton John's final tour, Farewell Yellow Brick Road, I mean, that tour went for 5 years. It went from 2018 until 2023. Of course, it was partially disrupted by the pandemic. So there weren't many dates in, 2020 or 2021, but the principle still applies. So I'd definitely say that I hope Taylor Swift doesn't change the set list. I don't mind if she does, like, if she, say, debuts and, like, plays songs from the Tortured Poets department as surprise songs. I think that's absolutely fine, but I would hate to see it get a permanent spot on the set list when most dates have already been and gone, and when her first ever album doesn't even have a permanent spot on the set list. But let me know what you think. Should Tortured Poets department be added to the Eras tour? Should she do a second Australian leg? Or should it have its own tour? If it has its own tour, what are you thinking the aesthetic will be? Like, I'm thinking it'll be, quite, in terms of aesthetic, I think it'll be similar to, say, Folklore and Evermore. Like, it'll be, black and white, but then I think in terms of sound, I'm expecting the new album to be a lot like Midnight's. Like, I think it could be Midnight's Part 2. Like, some people have already speculated that it's going to sound like You're Losing Me, but I have a feeling, I just have this sneaky suspicion, that it's just going to be a really upbeat album, and that it's, rather than being, I'm so sad, I feel like it's going to be, well, I'm going out tonight. You cool with that? Cool, because I don't like being locked in the basement. So I think it's going to be like this sort of, like, maybe her regaining her confidence again, her regaining her power, her just having fun, and her working through the breakup with Joe and working through those emotions. And I think it's going to be an album that is probably her most personal piece of work ever. But we'll find out next month. And of course, I will be posting more vlogs before then, which may or may not be about Taylor Swift. This one just happened to be about Taylor Swift. Originally, I was going to talk about the whole, Kate and William drama, but then there was this photo allegedly of Kate. Allegedly. I looked at that photograph, it looked nothing like her. So what I had been planning to say, it was a little bit outdated. But I guess my main opinion that I hold regardless of that alleged photograph being published today is that could it not just be that Kate really is just at home in bed recovering? I mean, is that not a possibility? Or could it just be that Kate's in her reputation era? Is that a possibility as well? I mean, I guess, again, like Taylor Swift's new album, we'll find out about the whole Kate and Will drama next month. If she does appear at the Easter events that she's supposed to appear at. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for tuning in to the Libby Shaw Show, and I'll see you next time. Bye.